Welcome to the Fintech Files. Today I have the pleasure to speak with Lauren Crossett, the head of commercial at Pinwheel. Lauren, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
To kick things off, could I please ask you to tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to this position?
Yeah. So I've been at Pinwheel about 1.5 years, and prior to Pinwheel, I was at Plaid. Prior to Plaid, I was at Quobo, which was an aggregator acquired by Plaid. So I've been in the aggregation space, or connectivity space, maybe I should say, for about 7 years. Prior to that, I was in more traditional financial services. So I ran the retail portion of a hedge fund, and much more traditionally, I was at MassMutual in my early portion of my career, and I even did a little stint working with my dad at his law firm after college. So pretty diverse set of experiences, but the majority of it has been in financial services and then fintech.
Can you tell us a bit more about Pinwheel?
How I describe Pinwheel is we provide connectivity to consumers' income and payroll accounts. And then from that point of connectivity, it really boils down to like two things that we can enable. So the first and most obvious and probably most in vogue is direct deposit switching. So institutions want to make sure that consumers use accounts at their institution. It's really important to have that direct deposit coming to that new account. And we provide the ability for the consumer to make that switch where it feels natural, like in the account opening process or in the experience of the institution where they want their money. The second thing we do from that same point of connectivity is make all of that income and employment data relative to that connected account available. So you can answer questions like, how much does this person earn per year or per hour? How long have they been at their employer? Who is their employer? Who are they? Like, who is this account owner? What shifts have they worked? What do their pay stubs look like? What are their W-2s? So it answers a lot of questions about this person's finance. And then that point of connectivity is ongoing as well. So you can continue to ask questions like, have their direct deposit allocations changed? Has their income changed? Has their employment changed? Have they worked more shifts? And so all that data is quite valuable, and all the use cases it unlocks as it not just being static or point in time is also really exciting.
A few questions on that. So first of all, when we talk about direct deposit, what does it mean? It means that the salary will go into a specific account, and that's what the battle is about?
Yeah. So typically, well, in a traditional scenario, when you go open a new account at a neobank or at a traditional bank, they kind of say like, okay, now please move your direct deposit here. But it's something that you do outside of that new account opening process. And then maybe if you don't move your direct deposit later in their flow, that institution marketing department is going to reach out to you and say like, hey, move your direct deposit here. Maybe they'll offer some carrot or remind you why this account is so great, but that still typically doesn't happen within that experience. And if it does, it's probably like you filling out a form and then still bringing that back to HR, your employer. And that's just like not how consumers expect experiences to work anymore. And so you don't really see great adoption through that path, or at least not through an excellent user experience. So what Pinwheel does is like, we're actually embedded in those flows. So in account opening, in that call to action from the marketing department about like why you should move your direct deposit, Pinwheel actually pops up, and then consumers can search for their payroll provider or their company. And this could be, a gig platform, an unemployment portal, a major employer, or traditional payroll platforms. And then from there, the consumer says, I want to move all or some of my paycheck into this new, 3 screens, very simple process. And it's a synchronous response, right? Like it worked or it didn't work. And then a cycle or two later, the consumer will see that direct deposit in their new account.
You mentioned two things, direct deposits and also data. So how does it work from the consumer side in terms of giving access to this data, and what can they do with it?
Absolutely. So the consumers are the employees, right? Like they're the people actually doing the work. And so they're benefited by the connectivity, making things so much simpler for them. And then also by our clients being able to actually provide new services that are better services for the consumer because they have access to this data. So an example of existing things that consumers have to do is like when they're trying to verify their income or verify their employment, typically in a lending scenario, or even for like getting an apartment or a home. that's typically like a process where they actually have to go and get physical PDFs and scan them and deal with the kind of like stuff that feels pretty antiquated. And through our service, it's very seamless, right? It's just a matter of a couple clicks, and then the data is available and it's normalized, and the lender can go and use it immediately. And so decisioning can be a lot quicker and simpler. What else is possible, what we're really excited about, is like lenders or financial institutions can also offer so many additional benefits because they have that ongoing visibility into like how many shifts have been worked and how you're paid. And so we're really excited about a number of our clients offering earned wage access or early wage advance based on the data that we make available. And we're really excited to see consumers not have to go and use credit cards with really high interest rates or payday loans because they're able to just get the wages that they've earned and get a better handle on their financial life.
Your previous employer, Plaid, was a guest on the show earlier. So there's a parallel with open banking, right?
There's a lot of similarities. I think in Europe, the whole way that people are paid is quite different. Like in the US, there are these major payroll providers, and they're actually the ones processing the payments. And there's like all this data that lives with those payroll providers. And sometimes that data is actually sold to the credit bureaus. And so it's a little bit different, but very similar in that like the access mechanism is the same, right? Like someone can leverage their credentials and say like, hey, this is a part of my financial life. This is a financial account of mine that I want to be able to grant access to and leverage the data from.
So now we understand the mechanics. I'm interested in understanding how new is this and how big is it, and kind of at what stage are we?
Like a handful of players in our space. I'd say people started working on this. Some companies will say like they were founded in like 2018, but really we saw it take off maybe max 2 years ago in terms of a really fully digital solution. Prior to that, there had been other solutions that were more form-based, even if it was an API. The API still kind of completed it. And so the digital solutions have really come to rise in the last couple of years. And mainstream adoption has really been in the last year, where we've seen it kind of become table stakes, especially for neobanks. And I'm really pleased to see quick adoption and some fast follows from a lot of major traditional financial institutions.
And therefore, the potential for this is what? That all employees have access to the data, and therefore it becomes fully transportable. And does the employer have a say?
Yeah, there's still some employers that don't use digital solutions, right? So as they think about like what's the best offering for their employees, I think it will become more important for employers to recognize like which platforms allow for what kinds of connectivity and how that can benefit their and then there's some companies out there as well that think about like what else is available for the employers that simplifies their lives. And I think we'll continue to see that evolve as well. And there's kind of like I would call like a sister category to us of access at the employer level to payroll platforms, so that employers can also have additional flexibility in how they really opt, because there's lots of benefits that could live at the employer level as well.
And now looking at Pinwheel, you've recently raised $50 million, which is a very significant amount. And I'm trying to understand the business and who are your typical clients.
Yeah, our typical clients are financial institutions. So on the direct deposit switching side, it's a company that has an account and routing number and wants consumers to bank with them. You know, our early adopters have been the major neobank powerhouses, and kind of the fast follow has been like your top 20 banks in the US. On the data side, our typical customer is a lender, most obvious type of loans being personal loans, where it's really helpful to have some additional data beyond what's available for folks that maybe have like a little bit of a lower score, are a bit credit invisible, and so forth. And on the employer side, you know, that's a little bit more in its nascency. Like I said, there's kind of a sister part of our fields that thinks about employer level connectivity to payroll. And it'll be interesting to see kind of how the two pieces of the puzzle come together. But what we've seen so far is it's important for employers to make sure that their employees have access to financial products that they need and are able to get the loans or the access to their wages that helps them live a better financial life.
If we zoom in further and we look at how does it look from the point of view of the client of Pinwheel? I understand from the website that it's accessed through an API, but can you explain to us a bit more?
So primarily folks use our SDK. So what our customers will do is have a backend service that essentially calls our service to pop up on an individual consumer basis. And then depending on what we're doing, if we're doing a direct deposit switch or if we're going and retrieving data, there will be a little bit of like an intro screen giving context and saying like, hey, we're going to connect your account for XYZ reason. And then the consumer is presented with the option of like, who pays you? So for selecting their payroll provider or their employer. And then we kind of like have a couple of paths to help them figure out exactly what's the right place to connect if they're confused at all. And then they enter whatever their credentials are. So typically a username and password combination. And then again, if it's a direct deposit switching flow, it's kind of a how much or all of it option. And we give a thumbs up or say success or failure. And then if it's just on data, it's just again, like, great, we're connected. And now the data is going into that institution. And then we kind of like hand it back over to decide what they're doing with that information.
And therefore, from the employee point of view, let's say they go for a neobank and they want to transfer the salaries, they will start there. And then they will have an interface, which is yours. That's when they sign up. And then back to the neobank.
Yep.
Is that right?
Another good example of where it's very similar to a Plaid-like experience.
What does it look now behind the scene? What did Pinwheel have to build in order to be able to deliver that experience to those clients?
Yeah, the most important piece is probably the connectivity. So we have about 1,500 platforms that we provide connectivity. And so that does include your major payroll platforms, your employer-specific platforms, your unemployment portals, different government portals for how people are paid, gig economy, so your Uber, Lyft, Etsy, we're really trying to lean in and understand the future of work and where people are paid. And so that coverage continues to, we think we're at about 80% of people in the United States that are working that we can provide coverage for. And we're continuing to push that as high as we can have it go. And then the other kind of element is we have a database of employers because not everyone knows exactly who their payroll provider is. And so it's helpful to say like, hey, AAA uses ADP and kind of give some of that mapping. It's often surprising to our clients that about 65% of users will go to their payroll platform and they know that rather than have to search through the employer. But we just want to make it as seamless as possible to the consumer. And so we've built up that database of employers as well. And then we have a number of SDKs to make sure that it's native in iOS or Android or whatever language our customers are. And then we are, for certain customers, we've kind of rolled out more of just like an API only solution where if they're very married to their own experience, they don't have to feel like they're popping out into our widget. And, I think the thing that's always important to kind of explain to people that aren't as familiar to these kind of connectivity solutions is it's not like one and done. It's often like an ongoing task, right? Like keeping connections in good shape, making sure we're monitoring them, giving good visibility to our customers for what's going on with our system, and continuing to try and make it better, like lower latency, fast, more coverage, all of those things. So it's this kind of ongoing effort.
Now, looking a little bit about the growth, which I think has been spectacular, but also challenges and your role. So we had a little conversation earlier about your role as head of commercial, and I was asking, based on my previous experience, how different is it to head of sales?
Along with sales, I run partnerships, account management, customer success, solutions, and data access, because a lot of this is like our whole go-to-market motion. Like Fintech is such an ecosystem that it's really important for partnerships and sales to work hand in hand. And sales has to be equipped to be able to say, okay, we also have a solutions team and an implementation team to help our customers make it as easy as possible, again, to actually implement our solution. And then account management is hugely important because we really think like we're an ETF, so to speak, on Fintech, right? Like we need to make sure that as our customers are growing, we're growing with them and that we're really aligned and aware of what are the next things that we should be tackling and how can we continue to enable our customers. And so that all kind of clicks together, right? Like we want to make sure that even the people responding to Zendesk tickets or quick questions that may be technical are also echoing that back to say, what else could we be doing? How else could we be improving? We're a really customer-centric company. And so having all of these kind of client-facing elements together in one org has been super important to our growth.
And what I see from fast-growing fintechs, and there's been a few on this podcast, is there's really this advanced notion of the customer-centric, which encompasses everything. Nevertheless, can you tell us a bit more about the process?
We have
What's
been
the
extremely
typical process?
lucky to have a great inbound funnel. Even right when the company was coming out of stealth mode, we had just a flood of interest, because I think it's been a point of friction for consumers for too long. And I think the market was kind of waiting for someone to tackle this. And a large amount of why I even came to Pinwheel because I kept hearing the same question. How do you really know what someone's income is? When are you going to be able to have connectivity to payroll? Okay, great. The market has asked enough times where I see the major need, and I'm going to go be a part of this as well. And so that's been huge for our growth, is that it's not something we have to convince people of. It's not a business case that we kind of have to create. It's very clear. Everyone knows that LTV of users goes up tremendously if you have their direct deposit. And everyone knows that there's a lot of accounts out there that are unfunded and inactive, particularly in neobanks as well. And then in the more traditional segment that are very siloed. Maybe someone has their checking account with a traditional bank, but doesn't do anything else with them. And so there's a lot of opportunity to bring that share of wallet more front and center with direct deposit switching for one, and then two, the visibility that we provide into where else is that paycheck going, and alerting of if there's any additional changes. So the inbound interest has been fantastic. And then my team partners really closely with our marketing team, which is quite new for us. We've only had a marketing team for a few months. And prior to that, as my team really going out and being leaders in the fintech industry, like I kind of mentioned, it's so much its own little ecosystem and microcosm that it's important for us to make sure that we are helping clients, particularly really early startups, figure out what are the problems that are going to be ahead for them, and how can we help them solve, and not just say with the Pinwheel service, but how else can we help them, maybe with hiring, with making sure that they're connected to VCs, with just introducing them to our network of different partners. Maybe they need a banking as a service provider, maybe they need an aggregator. And so how can we point them in the right direction and help them get connected and get all the resources that they need. And so that's been a big part of our outbound motion, is not just saying hey, come buy Pinwheel, but trying to say hey, we're here to be partners. We're here to bring fintech forward. Come with us. And now that we do have a marketing team, and they're absolutely fantastic, doing more things like this, like podcasts, webinars, events. And now it's really exciting that we're also going to be doing more in-person stuff and getting to see folks in real life again.
It seems as well kind of a process that perhaps is part of the playbook in terms of fintech, where the first stage of growth is very much driven by the product-led growth and inbound. Then at some stage, this is limited. Then you need marketing to sustain it, and, to do a lot of things that marketing do, right?
It's taking it to the next level. As you mentioned, we're scaling pretty rapidly, and we want to make sure we're reaching all of the markets that we should be reaching.
Perhaps the marketing has something to do with the $50 million fundraising round. I'd like to know, what this changed for a company when you've got such a significant milestone.
We've always had incredibly high goals and big ambition, and this has really just allowed us to accelerate that growth. So yes, we can invest in marketing. We can grow my team substantially so that our go-to-market arm is really strong, and then continuing to invest in engineering and product, because there's so much else we can do here. We've had huge initiatives on data quality to ensure that as people are leveraging, the data that we provide, that it's clean and that they don't have to spend months and months building on top of it to make it usable, that it's out of the box usable. And then continuing to think about what's next? What else should we be offering our clients? What else is top of mind for them? And how else can we build that as quickly as possible to meet our customers' growth as well? Because it's not just us in the fintech ecosystem that have been raising a lot and quickly. And so it's kind of all happening so fast, so different than when I first got into this space. It feels like what happened in the early days of Quovo or Plaid took years compared to what's taking us a few months. And so, the raise will help us continue to execute at that pace.
That brings us to your outlook. How do you think this is going to evolve?
Our mission is creating a fairer financial future. And I really do think that we are driving at that mission, not in a direct consumer sense, but in the way that we enable all of these businesses to create new opportunities for consumers. So, direct deposit switching on its own kind of looks like a little bit of a commodity, but as consumers have more flexibility and it's easier for them to choose like what is the right institution for them, I do think that that is creating a fairer financial future. And then from the data aspect, that's where there's so much opportunity, right? Like we already have customers doing earned wage access, and that's fantastic. You want to see folks be able to have access to the wages that they've earned. And I think we'll see that really become more of an expectation than the carrot in the way that like Chime and Earnin and all these other companies have done to like get paid 2 days early. And now you can see one of the major top 20 banks in the US offering that. I think earned wage access will probably be the next thing. And it's going to continue to be like, what are the other services that we can make really simple for consumers based on data? So in the same way that we've seen like just an explosion of fintech and consumer benefits in the financial services world after the rise of bank aggregation or bank data, I think we'll see like wave 2 through income and payroll data.
Yeah, this is really mind-blowing possibilities now that I hear you about it, because there's so many things that we've taken so granted. I know I've never changed my bank account, not because it's exceeding my expectation on a daily basis, but just because I find it's going to be really hard to change my direct deposit to anything else. The same with salaries. We always think, oh, this is a 30-day thing. But what if we could change it? And then there's data. So definitely a lot to consider there, Lauren. Thank you so much for expanding our horizon. As we're coming to the end, I just have a few personal questions that I'll ask all my guests, if you allow me. And the first one is, what would you do if you were to choose a different career path?
I got into financial services early, and so that's really been my focus of how can we make sure that people aren't disenfranchised by financial services. But as a new parent, I'm feeling particularly disenfranchised by the healthcare system. So I would be working on that problem. It's going to take 6 months to get my 7-month-old an allergy test. And so that feels like a big problem that I'm currently feeling frustrated by, that I would love to tackle.
All right. Congratulations. And the next question is, how do you invest personally?
I work with a fintech company that uses tech and advisors. They've been great. So they do a lot of our investing. My husband and I have an organic farm. So we put a lot of money into that because we think it's really important that there's good, sustainable food sources. And then I do a bit of angel investing as well. So there's a lot of other startups that I can't work at, but I want to cheer on and help succeed. So, and then, all of our customers have apps, and so I use them. And sometimes it's a little confusing to remember all of the places that I have an account, but it's really fun to see how different companies are tackling education, simplicity, loan practices. And so that's been really cool to see as well.
What a wonderfully diversified portfolio, first. And secondly, I think that no matter where the S&P or Bitcoin, etc., go up and down, it's a very exciting time to be an investor because there's so many possibilities, and you're a perfect example of making the most of that. So thank you so much, Lauren.
We're really excited for the future here. It's not only like getting paid every day, but also like, what if you could have a refi that the bank offered you because your financial situation changed? What if it was like really easy and simple to get a mortgage? Or what if your institution helped you prepare for that and then like made it really, really easy? And so like making this data more available and giving consumers more leverage is something that's really exciting. So thank you for allowing me to talk about it.